Hello, and welcome to the Co-Curriculum, A Tale of Two Transcripts. While we're all familiar with the academic transcript, we tend to be a little less familiar with its younger sibling, sometimes called the co-curricular record. Today, we'll be learning a little bit more about the terminology and concepts related to co-curricular records and hearing about how two institutions are leveraging this idea on their campus. Thank you so much for joining us today. And due to the number of attendees, your microphone is muted, but please be sure to write in any questions you have throughout the presentation in the GoToWebinar widget, and we will pause for answers as we go through. We'll also be sending you a very brief survey assessment after this webinar. Your feedback means a lot to us, and if you wouldn't mind spending a minute or two filling that out, we'd greatly appreciate it. So without further ado, let's get started. My name is Ann Lundquist, and I'm the Assistant Vice President of Campus Adoption at Campus Labs. And in that role, I work with a lot of our member campuses and also with campuses when they're exploring the use of various pieces of the Campus Labs platform and solutions, particularly in the student affairs space. I've worked in higher ed and in student affairs for the majority of my career, and most recently at Western Michigan University. And I'm excited to have joining us today two great colleagues from two institutions who are going to share their stories. Dr. Evan Heiser is the director of Western Michigan University's Signature Program, which is their quality initiative focused on helping students stand out upon graduation through encouraging and validating outside of class learning experiences. Dr. Heiser has been coordinating co-curricular transcripts for almost 10 years, previously working with the Elon Experiences transcript at Elon University. He has used his work with co-curricular transcripts to do research into the benefits of both breadth and depth of co-curricular and extracurricular experiences. And Tristan Tosh has 20 years of experience working in higher education in both residence life and campus activities. Tristan earned his undergraduate degree in communications and a master's in multicultural humanistic education from SUNY New Paltz. He currently lives in New York with his wife Carly and their amazing children ages 4, 6, and 8. Among other roles, Tristan serves as the site administrator for Pioneer Life, or the Engage platform at William Patterson University, and helps departments navigate the system as well as design curriculums to encourage student engagement. So we're very pleased and excited to have their stories today, which will help us get into some use cases and examples that we hope you'll find meaningful. I'm going to do a little context setting first for us and then turn it over to Evan and Tristan to talk more about their campus examples. If we look at some of the work from Vincent Tinto, he reminds us that many institutions are still in the phase of not having a coherent framework to guide their thinking about which actions related to student engagement matter and how they should be organized and how we should measure success. And what that often means for a campus is this, what he calls uncoordinated patchwork of actions, with a lot of staff time and resources and folks really focused on the intention of meaningful engagement for students, but potentially the student experience may not be as well designed as it could be. I'm going to do a little language talking here for a minute. When we talk about co-curricular, we're thinking about that broad swath of experiences and events that enhance and enrich the academic curriculum, whether they are intentionally aligned or not, that are clearly student-centered or learner-centered. Often they're focused on things that facilitate development of various domains outside of just the cognitive or the academic learning that's taking place. They are typically, but not always, separate from academic coursework or where credit is being awarded. The experiences are wide and varied, as you'll hear from our guests today. And increasingly, there are direct collaborations between academic affairs and student affairs with staff and resources from those various areas coming together in a particular way. The co-curricular transcript has had a kind of a storied career. I was in a presentation with Kevin Kruger, the president of NASPA, and I like how he describes this evolution, so I've sort of borrowed it from him. In around the 1970s, the transcript was something that came about, the co-curricular transcript, the idea that we should keep track of and understand the experiences outside the classroom. At that time, we didn't have technology the way we do. And what happened was, as he said, they sort of died under the weight of their own bureaucracy. People were keeping track of them on paper. It was laborious. And while the idea was fresh, the ability to pull it off on a campus just certainly wasn't possible. They kind of reemerged again in the early 2000s, and then they sort of dipped away from our thinking, and they've come back in the recent few years as an idea and a practice, partly because there's more research and literature, as well as some of the technological ability to manage the multiple threads related to the experiences and the student facing side of things. When we talk about language, there's a lot of terminology that has some separate but related ideas. The comprehensive student record is one thing that's been in the field, although NASPA has sort of recoined it recently as the comprehensive learner record, understanding that we are lifelong learners and that people step in and out of the learning environment for credit and non-credit with our institutions in multiple ways across their lifetime and ours. Some people refer to specifically a co-curricular transcript or an experience as the Elon experiences, extended transcript, student involvement transcript. So you see some of the terminology here. And there also this idea of a curriculum, but outside of the classroom comes up. Some of the related concepts that campuses also use are things like e-portfolios. This is often more common in the academic space, but there are places where there's a co-curricular layer or lens, and where students in this case are providing examples of their work or demonstrating that they've received some kind of knowledge, skill, or competency, which also leads to the badging conversation. So this is another way that folks are thinking about this space. How do students both know about and get involved in spaces where they can learn and gain the mastery and the knowledge, and then how can they demonstrate and we assess that? There's also the certificate conversation. Competency-based education is another, licenses or other credentialings. And then the experiences are wide and varied. So service and internships, participation in club and organizations, things that are related to the academic side like undergraduate research or student teaching, and on and off campus employment, among many other examples. So why do they matter, these comprehensive learner records, which is just the phrase that I'll stay with for the rest of this intro here? There's clearly a lot of public discourse around the value of higher education, especially around the value and meaning and purpose of co-curricular programs. We all know that there's increasing financial and fiscal constraints, and so we have to prioritize and reallocate our financial and human resources in meaningful ways. So if we're going to focus on programs, we want to know that they matter and that students are getting meaningful learning out of them. There is an increased emphasis on student learning outcomes outside of the classroom and the assessment of those outcomes. And then really a focus on the mission of the institution, which usually has some whole student focus or beyond the classroom mission at its core. So with that in mind, institutions are developing comprehensive learner records or those varied experiences for a variety of reasons. Some of them are particularly looking to document the range of student experiences. So what are all of our students doing? Where are they doing them? What are different populations of students doing? And what do we know about their experience? We may be thinking about rebranding and highlighting the value of our co-curricular experience. So for our students, why should you get involved with us? For our faculty colleagues and our administration, to demonstrate the value beyond the sometimes not clear perceptions of what we do in student affairs and the co-curriculum. It's also an intentional way to provide opportunity for student reflection and learning and development. So not just attending the event or participating in the experience, but meaning making and learning, and then advancing to using that information as a student to move forward to some additional learning environments. It helps students to articulate and translate their experience both in the employment space, on campus, when they're seeking, say, an internship or they're looking at graduate school. How are they going to use and articulate this information beyond the experience itself? It can also be an intentional way to help students navigate the university. So how do I make meaningful choices about my involvement? And certainly there is this marketable skills, connecting students to employers component, which is a part of why campuses are developing them. In addition, they're also looking at some things like external accountability. So if I've collected all this information and done a really great job for students, I'll probably have data and information that is meaningful in the accreditation conversation, for example. It also leads to some wonderful marketing pieces. So prospective students can learn about the variety and type of experiences that students can engage in on your campus. There's stories that come out of often these examples. Admissions can then leverage that for recruitment. It's also valuable for retention. Talking about how students make their way through the institution can help you tell stories and introduce you to other student experiences, and students can learn from one another in this way, which hopefully leads to some increased student success, however we define that on our campus, graduation rates, etc. It also can be valuable in fundraising or in leveraging grant writing, and also bridging those sometimes silos between academic affairs and student affairs. The bottom line as we kind of think about all this is we're definitely from that early upstart in the 1970s transitioning away from just checking boxes and keeping track of a list of things. It's more about the involvement, the reflection, the experience, the intentionality. Couple of things before I transition to our campus examples. What are campuses thinking about as they get going on thinking about this whole space? Well, there's certainly the process and the design. You know, what's the purpose of our program? How are we going to validate experiences? In other words, the integrity, the way we have integrity within an academic program. A faculty member has a syllabus, and I can, if I got a course grade, we can say that the institution is stamping it as being meaningful. The value and utility of the record itself, or of the output of those experiences or those involvement. What is the reciprocal obligation or the transfer between institutions? Technology and data is a huge consideration. How am I going to keep track of all these things and who's going to do that? And then what kind of assessment? And campuses are asking themselves questions about what kind of experiences should be recorded and how is this different from a transcript. And employers aren't necessarily asking for this, but more campuses are producing documentation that they can bring forward. So it may be an onus on us to help coach students to bring it forward. One other resource I would share with you, and some of you online may be institutional participants, or you'll know campuses that have participated in the Lumina project with ACRO, who are our campus registrar colleagues, and NASPA. There was a great project where campuses, they were looking at what are campuses doing in this space, and it's wide and varied. And they also did some mini meetings with 18 institutions. Western Michigan was part of that a couple of years ago. At the end of this slide deck is a link to some resources from ACRO, NASPA, and Lumina that you may want to look at, including some case studies. So beyond our two wonderful broad examples today, you can also get some other information. A little bit of food for thought from the final report from the Lumina project. Learning is taking place in lots of places, and so how can we capture that well? Using a checkbox approach to capturing activities is not sufficient motivator for students. And actually, it actually just motivates those students that are already involved. So if our motivation is retention and involvement of under-involved students, we have to think of some different ways to go about it. And there is a tendency to move beyond the academic transcript as the only proxy for success at a campus. So how are we going to lead this conversation with meaningful, validated, reflective experiences for our students and with institutional data around that? Last bit here, campuses are concerned about the integration of data between systems. They know it's necessary. How am I going to keep track of this and produce meaningful data for my own understanding? A need for what they call a three-dimensional record. So how can the recipient drill down into their experience and not just be the receiver of the experience? Customization by the student, and validation of the student identity and the activities that they're involved in. We also are thinking about ways that employer responses and desires can be taken into consideration. So many campuses are engaging with employers to talk about what are you looking for in our students, and that's shaping some of the experiences and pathways that they're setting up. How can we integrate with marketing for external audience use of this? The collaborations I've mentioned, career services and career planning are often key players at the table, even if they are not the, say, owners or facilitators, but they're often deeply and highly involved. And that student learning is relevant, and how do we have evidence of that? So with that as a context, what I'd like to do is ask if Tristan from William Patterson is going to share with us a little bit about his model. And then after he does, Dr. Ebenheiser will also go into Western's model. So Tristan, feel free
Thanks,
to
Ann.
take it away.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. So I'm Tristan Tosh, Assistant Director of Campus Activity Service and Leadership at William Patterson. We are a school in New Jersey of about 12,000 students. We are spread across pretty large acreage and have a real need to kind of solidify and bring together our different programs that are happening around campus. So what we want to do is kind of talk about the process that we went through to bring together a cohesive and understandable way that students can get engaged outside of the classroom in a way that makes sense to them. We initially started with our Pioneer Life system. And our system here, this is what it looks like, encouraging all students to get involved. But we didn't start there. In the beginning, we only had Banner. Banner was something that we used in order to track students' involvements and participation. Some of our goals in moving towards a different structure outside of Banner was to identify high impact practices for key performance indicators that are happening around campus. What are those activities that students are getting involved in that keep them connected to the university? And how many places are they happening so that we can kind of pull them into one place so students can understand how to follow through things and where their opportunities can be found on campus. We wanted to encourage the opportunity for students to have an engagement portfolio so they could start tracking the out-of-class experiences, not just their leadership positions. We wanted to encourage students to participate in clubs and organizations. And so we really wanted to invite the clubs and organizations to become partners in our out-of-class learning and our programming initiatives on campus. We wanted to also be able to identify the multiple areas in which people are going through honor society and general accomplishments so that we can honor those and give them to, certificates and things like that. So that was the initial goal. We were able to track student leadership positions, club membership, and the dates of term. That was something that was housed in Banner, and students were not able to extract that information. It was more for our internal use of tracking, working with alumni relations to connect for reunions, those sort of things. We were not able to track experiences. We weren't able to track service hours and events. And one of our main priorities on our campus is civic engagement. So service hours was important. Again, we had no central location for data management and collection. It was housed in multiple different departments around campus. So one of the first attempts we did was we created a programming model, an attempt to get students to understand the learning outcomes associated with events outside of campus. We decided to come up with icons that student clubs can use. We based it on our university core curriculum: 6 learning outcomes: personal well-being, expression, ways of knowing, diversity and justice, community and civic engagement, and global awareness. And we added 2 student leadership and career professional development. We wanted to have a well-rounded experience that students can go through. The issue with this, however, was clubs did not use the icons on their flyers. It was a real challenge to sell them on using those things. And there was no real blueprint to what it meant to complete out-of-class experiences using these 8 different areas. So the icons were not successful at all, unfortunately. So then we started using Pioneer Life, which was amazing. We were able to put our events around campus tracked through the system. We introduced the engagement portfolio to our students, which allowed them to track out-of-class experiences and really motivated them to build on that. And so students started to want to build not only their resume, but their engagement portfolio in a way that showed how involved they were on campus. And it was starting to really take effect that students wanted more and more activities. But what we had not done yet was we had not created a clear outline of what a path looked like or what a out-of-class event structure should look like, which led to the individual paths that we created. So we started with our paths, again, civic engagement being a huge criteria or initiative for our university. So we created 3 individual paths. These individual paths were challenged by choice. Students were not entered into them until they participated in one of the activities. We identified civic engagement, for instance, having to complete 2 low activities, which is serving at a food pantry or doing any kind of one-day service, and we did high-level activities, which also includes our UCC 5 class. So this was the first time we engaged the faculty in creating experiences collaboratively with campus activities so that students can have that out-of-class experience. We then also created Leaders in Action. That one is focused on student leadership training and being able to run and manage student organizations. And we also identified a very important group of students, such as first-year students, looking at their leadership potentials. And we created Pioneer Leadership Institute, which is a collection of 3 different modules and a community civic engagement component at the end of that. Those were wonderful, and it allowed us to continue to create more. So we created 2 additional ones. Our Greek Stars program is focused on our Greek community, fraternity and sororities, and the learning that is required for them outside based on their pillars of arete, such as scholarship, service, leadership, those sort of things. And we were also able to connect with our career development office to create a professional preparedness badge. So we created 5 different paths that students can challenge and participate in, and they have been widely successful so far. So what this then allowed us to do was, once we created the 5 different paths, we were able to create a Leads Honor Society. And basically, any student that completes 3 of our design paths are eligible to participate in the Leads Honor Society. The Leads Honor Society is also going to be expanded on. I'll talk about that in a little bit with how we want to add to that. But we were able to have our first induction, which it included about 40 students. So since 2015 to now, we have been very successful in getting students to complete each path, and about 40 of them at this year were able to complete 3 to be inducted into our inaugural Honor Society. So I want to go over some general themes with our paths. One thing, we wanted to create paths that were independent from each other. Students aren't necessarily able to take on a lot of other initiatives other than their classes. We have a student population here that do need to work, that do have a lot of out-of-school commitments. So we wanted to make it challenge by choice and to do what you can do. And just completing one path would have been fine. We do see that students are going above and beyond that. Students are not entered into the path until they attend one event. We do this so that students can already see that they've started progressing along their path, and we think it's a motivator for them to continue processing that. The only exception to that is professional preparedness that wants to target our seniors. So all seniors are entered into the path and encouraged to complete that. We are able to connect with campus events and academic programs. So we invite out of classes that are doing activities around campus to add them to the paths, and all they do is take attendance, and we're able to give students credit for participating in those activities. We also have way more buy-in from our student clubs and organizations, way more than when we had the programming model and icons. Students are very eager to connect to our paths now. Recognition of completion of each path level. So we do have a certificate program for completing one individual path, and then we have the Honor Society for those that complete 3 or more. We allow departments to track their own activities. So individuals in my office that are more directly with Pioneer Leadership Institute, which is our first year training, will manage that data. Civic engagement and Greek will manage their data, and then of course any department outside of our area manages their data, but I am the gatekeeper of all of that. And I say that because I think it's very important to make sure that there's consistency in these path programs, even though they're very different. Once they connect to the Leads Honor Society, that we are being strategic in how we set the goals of those programs. We do not allow self-reporting or reflection. So one of the things that I have noticed in using this system is sometimes students aren't necessarily going to the activities but report that they have. And so we focus a lot about attendance. We want to make sure students are present and available and are there. And then we also, all future paths will be created and designed in conjunction with campus activities. So our goal as we move forward is to connect additional paths to our program so that we can manage it. I want to get into just a quick view of how I set this up. So paths are designed. The one that I chose is the Leaders in Action. It's designed with 5 different domains. And each domain is based on a competency, so a clear learning outcome, and it clearly identifies how you connect events that fit that criteria to those domains. The domains are explained so students can see what exactly they're going to be gaining skill-wise. And if we can go to the next slide. And students are also able to see fulfillment options. So as we connect events to each domain, you're able to click on it and see when are the events happening so students can see and plan accordingly so they can complete their paths in a timely manner. So we've found wild success with this. So let me just get into the numbers a little bit. Starting in 2015, we had no data, civic engagement being one of our first paths that we rolled out. You could see the steady growth from 2150 to currently in fall 18, we had 6,252 students enrolled in the path. So that's about half of our campus. And remember, nobody gets in this path until they actually attend event. So these students did one thing. Most students did way more. And we have 382 students that have completed the path as of fall 2018. Another stat is Leaders in Action. I just want to go through that real quick. Again, 2015, we had no data, and you could see growth in that. We have about a quarter of our student body is engaged and completing this path. And again, this path is associated with club leadership. So we have a quarter of students that have decided to take on the challenge of running and leading a club. So that has been wildly successful. Greek stars is something we just rolled out, so our data is not as comprehensive as the other two, but we do have 42 people that have completed it. And professional preparedness, this was their first year as well, and we have 1953 students that have completed or that are enrolled in the path with 59 that have completed it. One of the great things that we did recently was we connected with our business office. They have already a predetermined SPA program, which is Student Professional Advancement, and they approached us because they were having major trouble tracking attainment of this path or these out-of-class learning experiences. So I was able to create and build a setup for them so that we are able to support this. Now, right now, the SPA program is not part of our leadership society, so this is a little separate, but our provost and the rest of the campus have very much been eager to get most colleges to create a path through this system, and we think the tracking is great. So where do we go from here? William Patterson is looking to expand in other areas. One of the first things we already started to outline is the Pioneer Pride Badge through Athletics and Rec Services, and that'll be attending athletic events and those sort of things. Social Justice and Equity through the Office of Inclusion and Diversity, and then Global Awareness through International Students and Scholars. Social Justice and Global Awareness are also connected to our UCCs, so our full intention is to connect with the academic side and to bring in their out-of-class experiences into the path. So that is how we are doing it here at William Patterson University, and I'm going to hand it over to Ann or Evan to explain what's next.
Thanks. Tristan, do you have a second to answer one question that came in that's related to yours? Because we're great on time here.
Sure.
It says, someone wants to know how often you add students to the paths.
Oh,
And do the
okay.
students get some kind of communication that lets them know that they've been added?
Absolutely. So what happens is anytime a student attends an event, we take attendance. And I get every attendance list and I upload them to the event and the path side. They are then notified that they are in the path through obviously their engagement portfolio and their front page where they see the path that they're connected to. But we also email them with an encouragement to continue on. So I have a couple of form letters that says you've started one path. Here's how you could continue. You have 2 done. If you do 1 more, you could be in the Honor Society. And then I have a letter that obviously, if you've done 3 or more, welcome to the Honor Society. So we are engaging in students pretty regularly. This is a daily thing that I do, uploading them to the path.
Perfect. And thanks for that. We had one more question, which I didn't say this at the beginning, so I'll say it now for all. There will be a recording of this afterwards, and so you'll be able to access that. You'll receive an email with that, so you should be able to share this with others if there are other folks that you want to hear what we have to say today.
Thanks, Ann.
Thanks, Tristan. There may be more questions, so feel free as you're
I'm staying
pondering,
on.
yeah, to type things into the box, and I'll grab those at the end. But right now, I'm going to switch to Evan so he can talk about Western Michigan.
Thanks, Ann. So here at Western Michigan, we've had campus labs for about 10 years. Only in the last couple of years have we really focused on developing our program that is a version to take all the benefits of a co-curricular transcript and all the things that Ann talked about initially and say, how do we make this meaningful for students and help them to advance? So the program that was developed is the program that I lead, WMU Signature. So WMU Signature is a student engagement program for students to reflect on their out-of-class learning experiences, for them to explore and identify a passion, and ultimately to do something unique. So we always talk about get engaged, find a passion, and do something unique. So the features of WMU Signature that I really want to talk about is that this is a program where all of our students are enrolled. It's something that happens automatically. So unlike Tristan, where students have to begin, go into an experience to start on the path, because we have one area, all students, and this includes undergraduate and graduate, we enroll them all in there automatically. Experiences across the entire university are tracked. So this is not one office or one college or one division. It's open to anything across the university. And that's really where Campus Labs Engage package makes this possible, because we have one tool that we can sell to all of our campus partners to be able to track attendance. We usually have them track attendance because they're interested in attendance already. We have a tool that we can help them provide that, and then we get the data so that we can help validate that for students with Signature. One other thing, when looking at co-curriculum models, WMU Signature really fits into that open curriculum. So a very wide open, especially at our first phase. And I'm going to talk about the 3 phases, but it's open to almost any out-of-class learning experience. So if students are learning something, it's open to it. And we really track that by when someone submits an event to count, we ask them to identify learning outcomes. And they don't have to be formal learning outcomes, but we do very much want them to be identified. What are students going to learn? This is really important because we're tracking things not only from student affairs and our student services areas, but also from faculty. So all of those lectures that they're putting on, but also our registered student organizations when they're holding events where students are learning. So some of the events that they're hosting that are tracking attendance, we aren't counting, but anytime when they're going to meetings or hosting speakers where learning is taking place, those things can count for WMU Signature. And then a big thing that is key to WMU Signature is reflection. And we want students to really reflect on their collective experience. So rather than reflecting all right after an individual experience, some of our hosts still have them do the evaluations. We ask students to reflect on periodic times throughout their time. This way, they can really be integrating their experience. And that is our one primary learning outcome that we focus on with WMU Signature is integrative learning. So one of the things that's really unique about WMU Signature is how we actually do the transcript. Students at Western would not refer to this as a co-curricular transcript because how they earn it is actually a designation right on their diploma. So within that, students are earning this high-level designation that's been adopted. We always get asked kind of how do we do this? And it really was just bringing on our registrar right from the beginning and our senior leadership. So some of the things that tied to that, WMU Signature is actually our HLC quality initiative, which for those schools that are in the SACS accrediting body, this would be like your QEP, where it's a university-wide initiative to improve the education for all of our students. So right from the beginning, we started off with kind of this mandate that it needs to be institution-wide. We had buy-in from our president, from our provost, from our vice president for student affairs to help make these things happen. We are just finishing our second full year of implementation. So we went through a development model where faculty, staff, and students all came together to try to create the idea. We piloted for 1 year with about 100 students, and then we launched it 2 years ago. Our office, so within WMU Signature, we do not actually host any experiences. This is a big thing when trying to look to replicate it. Western Michigan University has enough experiences already going on campus that we haven't found that we need to be hosting things to help students go through. We just want to be helping students to make better meaning of their experiences, to encourage that engagement, and really to help them to integrate it too. One other thing is similar to William Patterson, Western Michigan University's Hayworth College of Business has a more traditional co-curricular path, so less of the open where they've designated you need to attend these events and these experiences that all of our College of Business students have to do. It's actually a degree requirement, and it's called the Student Professional Readiness Series, or SPURS as it's known on campus. It's a great program that all students, and it's run within Campus Labs Engage as well. That's one of the big things that Engage has helped us to do when thinking about these different transcript areas is actually co-count these things. So students in our College of Business are really focused on SPURS, especially at the beginning, because this is a degree requirement. So they're making progress. We count some of that for WMU Signature to help them. So the actual structure of our program, so there's 3 different phases. The first phase is called Explore. The second one is Focus, and the final phase is the Peak Experience. So at Explore, students are asked to participate in 12 experiences. This is where the open curriculum really is broad. It's any 12 experiences that have a learning outcome. During these 12 experiences, we ask them to complete 2 reflections. So it's after they do 4 experiences, and then we prompt them again after 8 experiences. They're not rigid timelines. They can, if they complete the reflection a little bit early, or if they're a little bit slow, they're allowed to do that as long as they're answering the questions. And then the final thing is they actually have to declare a pathway. This is that find a passion part of WMU Signature. And this is where we start kind of narrowing students down. So we just really wanted them to get engaged at the beginning. We expect that to be their first year or 2 years in the Explore. And then at the end is when we want them to declare their pathway. And this also counts as a reflection for us. So it's not just kind of pick your choice like you would pick a major, but it's also say, why are you interested in that? The next phase is the Focus, and they need to complete 6 experiences. This is 6 experiences that are related to that pathway that chose. So while we've been tagging everything in the system with anything with learning, we're also been watching to say, what area does this fit? And in a couple slides, I'll show all the pathways, but during that process, we're saying this works for civic engagement pathway or diversity and inclusion, and it can count for multiple. So students are gaining credit in there. About halfway through this phase, they have to complete another reflection. This is going in a little bit more depth now. And we hope that this is about their 3rd year in school. The final phase is the Peak Experience. And this is the first time that they really have to interact with our office and do stuff specific for WMU Signature. We've designed this so that our engaged students, those students who are already out doing lots of stuff, they can earn WMU Signature without having to do a lot of extra stuff. We didn't want to create extra hurdles for the students if you're already engaged. We really wanted to make sure that they were getting the same benefits. So at this final phase, though, is where we actually assess the program, make sure that students have completed, and when they're going to earn something on their diploma. So this is now the first time that students are going to earn kind of that official piece. The Peak Project is a unique experience where students are putting their passion into action. And that's really as specific as we get. We want students to be generally doing something, and they have been shown us that they're way more creative than we are. So this is actually what the path looks like in Engage. Like I said, we don't use the co-curricular transcript feature. We actually use the paths feature so that students are watching that progress. At any point, they can go in and see which ones are these, and you'll see those couple of reflections. So students, as they're going through, will be prompted to do the reflection. So the pathways, we have 9 different pathways for students, and these were developed based on what students are interested in, what employers have let us know are values of their companies, as well as things that Western Michigan University has experienced and has a lot of programming around. So this is the current list. Teaching and student success is really around pedagogy. So that's why it's for our graduate students only. So it's for those students who are going to be really looking at how can they improve their own pedagogy as master's or PhD students and who want to go into a faculty role afterwards. So some of the things that make Signature unique, it is a co-curricular transcript program, but it's not about a printed transcript. It's university-wide, so all students are involved in it. We have those 3 aims for students to get engaged, find a passion, and do something unique. And then the final product is focused not on what students have participated in, but what they've uniquely done. So Anne had mentioned in the introduction to co-curricular transcripts that it's really getting beyond that check mark. So while we have a whole lot of check marks in the beginning phases, that final piece, students have to be out and doing something. And that's where it really becomes meaningful for our students as well as for our employers. They want to hear what students have done, not just what they've gone to. However, they do want to also have that it's integrated. So students will talk about how they did all these experiences, participate in lots of this stuff so that they were prepared to do something unique. And one of the things why at that final phase is students have to present on that. So they have to do a 3 to 5 minute presentation. It's open to the entire campus. And this is kind of that dress rehearsal for a job interview. How do you talk about WMU Signature if it's on your diploma? So how are we doing? This past year, we had 811 experiences that students could participate in that counted for WMU Signature from over 150 partners across campus. So this again includes academic departments, registered student organizations, student affairs, and the like. We had over 11,000 students participate in at least one WMU Signature designated experience this year. And in terms of the students who have made progress, 63% of our undergraduate students have made some sort of progress in their own WMU Signature. I had mentioned that this is just our 2nd year. So we've enrolled all of our juniors and seniors, and these are based on academic standing. So we've enrolled all of our juniors and seniors, and you'll notice that on the slide, their participation is lower. We've let them do the program and have encouraged them. However, our outreach is really focused towards our students that started the program from the first day they had. So that's where you see our freshmen and sophomores participation rates are significantly higher than our juniors and seniors. To date, between our graduate or our pilot and the other phases, we've had 94 graduates. And to kind of show the growth of the program, this year alone, we had 54 students. So we've had more graduate in this 1 year than the 2 previous years combined. One of the things I do want to give an example of is the peak projects. So I have 2 of our students, Shanti Lyman, who for her peak project started a We Vote group, which is a institutional initiative to encourage students to register to vote, to actually turn out to vote, as well as to do voter education. So hers is really an example of doing something very big. She happened at the time also be our student government president. So she is that quintessential, very engaged student who did something that has impacted all of campus. And that's a great example of kind of a wide-reaching peak project, what a lot of our students initially think of. The other one that I want to highlight is Roslyn Apolka, who did a much more personalized peak project. She took the Hate U Give book, and her major is actually visual art, so she's a painter, and took the cover of that book and designed a large 6 foot by 4 foot painting. The really cool thing that she did was, rather than just painting it herself, is she taped it off and then took it to the Boys and Girls Club of Kalamazoo and had students in the Boys and Girls Clubs actually do the painting. And while they were engaging with the painting, so the fun activity, she was talking about the different themes of the book. So her pathway was diversity and inclusion. So she was able to integrate not only her major through the painting, her passion, which is diversity and inclusion, but also then the community. And this really shows how students can integrate the things, and it's my best example of why we keep the criteria so open for our peak projects, because this is a project that I don't think any of our faculty or staff could have helped to come up with. So where are we going? I do want to highlight just a couple goals of WMU Signature. We are working to ensure that all students are engaged in co-curricular experiences. Now that we are tracking those, we can start identifying who is not, and this is tying into some of our university goals as well. So we aim by 2021 to be at 16,150, which is about the number of undergraduate students we have. We're currently at about that 11,000 students. Our third main goal, we want to promote students to explore and identify passion. So right about 10% of those students, so if we gain everyone, we want about 10% to actually be taking that next step in our program. And then our final one is we want students to complete an experience that's uniquely meaningful themselves, and kind of we went that 10% one more. So 160. All of these numbers are in those fiscal years, so it's not a cumulative. So we want 160 in 2021. So it compares to the 54 that we had this year. And that is all that I have on WMU signature.
Thank you so much, Evan. I do have a couple questions for you, and then a backtrack to Tristan, if you will. So a question about signature, Evan, is around like graduate students or transfer students. How do they flow in? Can they come in a more advanced space, like in the focus area, or do they all do explore? Just logistics around that.
Yeah, excellent. So all of our graduate students begin at the focus phase. The first thing that they're asked to do is actually declare their pathway, recognizing that they've already had an undergraduate experience that's been successful. Hopefully they've explored. For our transfer students, they can actually transfer in experiences that they've done at other institutions. So just like they're transferring in classes, we have forms within Engage where they can transfer in previous experiences that they've done.
That's great. And then someone else had a question about the PEAK project. You gave your two great examples, but what are the basic requirements like to declare it, and what are the components of the PEAK project?
So we've kept it very broad. The basic components is a student has to create something that is meaningful to themselves, is related to their passion area or their pathway, and has some sort of impact broader than just on themselves. And then we're really looking at evaluating them also that it's going to be something that is meaningful to an employer, that is a kind of culminating experience of a level. And that's where we'll work with students to kind of beef up some of their ideas to get it to the level where it's something they want to be talking to an employer. We do try to keep it as broad as we can with our requirements because we don't want to pigeonhole students. A lot of our students start thinking of it, is it like an honors thesis? Do I have to be writing a paper? And it's a very active process. So it's not a written thing. The one kind of requirement for the presentation and how we evaluate it is based on that 3 to 5 minute presentation at the end to really make sure that students have integrated all of their experiences, can talk about them appropriately, and have completed the actual project that they proposed.
Great. A couple more quick questions I think about WMU. Do you have any examples of what counts for experiences? I think you mentioned this a little bit, but it's all over campus, right? So anything that's actually happening on campus?
Yeah, we've tried to really cast as wide of a net, so we're counting attendance at the traditional events that everyone thinks of, the campus lectures, the outside speakers. We are also capturing study abroad, so while that's a very curricular experience, anyone who's done study abroad knows that it's not solely a curricular experience. There's a lot happening beyond what the actual faculty is teaching, so we count study abroad. We're going to be doing a better job of counting service experiences, so specifically volunteer service. And then we're also looking now to count involvement in registered student organizations. So we've really been trying to figure out how do we track beyond just involvement, beyond just showing up on the roster, but actually having an experience. And where we've kind of said you have to show up on the roster, and then you're going to have to attend at least 3 of that organization's events. And that's kind of where we've drawn the line for that will then kind of go from just being on the roster to actually being an engaged student.
Right. So I actually have I'm going to ask Evan first and then Tristan. These are both kind of review and approval process questions. So I'm going to ask Evan first and then Tristan, I'll ask you this as well. So how you mentioned, Evan, that the experiences, you don't host them, but they're coming from other places. But what is the review and approval process for something to count, or like just the logistical side? Who does that? How does that work within Engage?
So on the logistics, it's myself, and we have one other staff member who's directly tied to WMU Signature. So we review all of the events that want to be approved for WMU Signature. We've created a fairly simple process. So it just is, are you taking attendance? So we know that someone's there, and then what are the learning outcomes? And we base everything based on those questions. We're looking for what paths based on the learning outcomes.
Great, good. And maybe similarly, Tristan, but a little bit different, for your multiple programs there, who creates the requirements or the criteria for those pathways? You mentioned the 5 different ones. Who's
Right.
doing that?
So it is a collaborative effort. So the four that we are primarily responsible for, civic engagement, PLI, Leaders in Action, and Greek Stars, we did that collaboratively within our office. And again, based on learning outcomes that we think are important in these different paths. So it's very structured. So I'll give you a quick example. In civic engagement, we say 2 lows, and we've defined the lows as food drives, clothing collections, voter registration, volunteerism and community service for cleanups and things like that, 1-day visits to boys and girls clubs. So any of those activities that are kind of a 1-day, a couple of hour things that are happening, we're encouraging them to connect to the path. And we are kind of the gatekeepers of that. If we think something doesn't necessarily fit, we won't put it in there. And then of course, the civic engagement with the high level ones, we take attendance at all of the UCC Area 5s, which is civic engagement. We upload those automatically. And then they must be much more significant civic engagement opportunities. So we do an alternative spring break. We do a day of service on Dr. King Day, those sort of things. So it is very clear to the outside community what activities can be connected to these paths. And how they can go about doing it. And then with the one program we have outside of it, which is our professional preparedness, theirs is 4 steps, pretty simple. It's schedule and attend an appointment with career development staff, upload your resume to a service called Trailblazer, attend a career fair, and attend an additional career development event. So they are the ones creating all of their programming initiatives, take attendance, and then provide that information to me. So it is all very structured, and I would say differently than Western Michigan, a lot of the events that we are adding to our path are created by our department.
Great, thank you so much. It's a great example of the varied ways that people are using both the functionality within Engage, but also conceiving of the purpose based on institutional mission, student population. They don't all need to look the same. I hope that many of you who are attending may be also planning on coming to Connect this summer. I will be doing a couple of other panel conversations like this with other campuses as well. So if you're looking for other models and examples, be sure to check out all the good curriculum at Connect, but also we'll have a couple of panel presentations on this same topic in person in Baltimore. And I want to thank oh, wait, I have one more question, then I'm going to wrap it up. I don't want to miss this question because it's up my wheelhouse, which is assessment. So I wanted to know from each of you quickly, when it comes to learning outcomes, are you doing any assessment for those? And if so, what does that look like? Maybe Tristan first.
Sure, absolutely. Everything we do on campus is assessed. Absolutely. So we'll use Leaders in Action as an example. I have a core management training that we do, and we ask, a pre-test where their knowledge base is on Pioneer Life and our policies, things like that. And we have a post-test. We do the same thing with our additional training sessions that they attend because we want to make sure that the learning that we say is supposed to happen is actually happening. And most of our surveys, obviously not all, but most of our surveys come back very positive that we have achieved the goals that we were set out to achieve.
Great. And Evan, how about you? What kind of assessment, either programmatically or student learning?
Yeah, so WMU Signature, a big part of our ongoing assessment is just watching the numbers and pulling the reports to make sure students are attending and then outreaching to those students who haven't attended. But when it comes to our learning outcome, it's assessing those final capstone presentations of our peak experiences, which we do using a rubric so that we can actually say how well are our students. We also do use that not only for assessment, but also the evaluation. If they haven't reached a certain level, we're going to ask the students to come back in and try again to make sure that they've achieved something before we put something on their diploma.
Great. Good. Thank you so much. I think you gave us a lot of insight both into the logistical side, the thinking about the experience for the student, who's managing this on your campuses and how that's similar in some ways and different, the programmatic goals that you have really well thought out in advance and then continue to be evolved and developed as you go. So I really appreciate your expertise and your time today. And I want to thank everyone who attended the webinar and look for the email so that you can have the recording to the webinar in the near future. So have a great day, everyone. Thank you.